It was more the kind of Jerry Falwells, the James Dobsons, these kind of suit wearing, right, very buttoned up, kind of denominational, conventional evangelical leaders. What Trump has ushered in, and this began almost as soon as he hit the scene as a presidential candidate in 2015, is he has brought from the fringes a bunch of these independent charismatic figures, including a bunch of new Apostolic Reformation leaders. And really central to that story has been Paula Cain, who is Trump's closest religious advisor. She's an independent charismatic. She's a televangelist, a megachurch pastor, has even called herself an apostle. And so within that world, these folks, and this is very similar to what's happened in the Republican Party overall, right? These figures who were previously marginal had tended to carry some more kind of extreme ideas, more far right in their ideology, have been brought into the center of the new religious right that we're seeing today. Trump and MAGA has kind of moved the people who were at the center of the conversation out to the margins, sometimes driven them out of the conversation entirely. And now we have this new leadership cohort, often built around these more new Apostolic Reformation and charismatic ideas and identities, and pushing the administration in more extreme directions than we've ever seen the Christian right push an administration.
Yeah, this is part of the reason I teed up that Times piece with the Texas curriculum is because that kind of hits on this concept. And, so much of what, when we look at like Trump, this modern conservatism, and I really hate to use that term because I feel like it doesn't grasp like this post-ideological move
Right.
that's happening on the American right. And even that term, the right, really doesn't grab it either. But part of the reason I brought that up is because it seems like, we talk about Trump as an accelerant. We talk about like an amplification. We talk about elements that have always been there, but more so. And the curriculum really kind of touches on. It's not Oklahoma. It's not the guy who just stepped down. I can't remember the school superintendent out there, but
Ryan Walters.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. It's not as extreme as that, but it sounds like this thing called the Seven Mountains Mandate. What is that?
So the Seven Mountains is a prophecy, right? And I just said there's a lot of people in this world, and these charismatics, they tend to believe that there are prophets. And so there was a prophet who was very involved in the New Apostolic Reformation. His name's Lance Wallnau, fairly prominent commentator today on the Christian right. And Wallnau, around the year 2000, claimed that he, in interaction with other charismatic leaders and hearing some of their ideas, received this prophecy of the Seven Mountains. And the idea is that the world is locked in spiritual warfare between the forces of Satan and the forces of God. And that in every society, the forces of Satan are trying to take over and control that society. And they imagine the different arenas of authority and kind of coalitions within society as mountains. And so there's 7 of these. There's government, family, education, religion, arts and entertainment, media, and then commerce and business, right? And each one of those is its own mountain. And in every society, the top of those mountains are either controlled by Satan and the demons or by God and the Christians. And there's no in between. And then the mandate part, because it's called the Seven Mountain Mandate, the commandment from God, according to this prophecy, is for Christians to take over every one of the 7 mountains in every society that they can in order to have Christian influence flow down from the top. And I'll just observe, right? If we go back and think back about the religious right of the 1980s and 1990s, they had an agenda to Christianize society, right? They wanted to see our society be more Christian. They were playing within the rules of democracy, right? We were the moral majority. And if we can just get Christians voting and using their demographic power, then we can change Christianize society, right? It was a grassroots effort to kind of mobilize Christians in order to accomplish certain conservative Christian agenda items, right? The Seven Mountain Mandate is not that, right? This is a minoritarian mindset saying that there's a subsect of Christians who understand this calling and they need to take over positions of power and influence, and then the influence will flow down. This is a top-down restructuring of society. And as you noted, education is one of the mountains. In fact, it's one of the most important mountains in their strategies, because they recognize that if you can revise the way that children are educated, then a generation down the road, that becomes the new reality, right? If you instill Christian nationalist narratives in children, they believe, then they will that becomes the new status quo, the new normal. And so they've always targeted education, especially since Trump has kind of come on the scene, because education is seen as one of the key battlefields for these culture wars that they want to prosecute.
I just, for folks who don't know, and if you're just joining us, I've got Matthew Taylor. He is a PhD at Georgetown at ICJS up in Baltimore now, former evangelical, studied. If you don't know this, Fuller Theological Seminary is really huge in the evangelical community, theologically speaking. All right. And I like to separate out politicized evangelicals from the faith and the practice, because that's a politicized, generally speaking, and that could be left or right. All right. I mean, a smaller subset within that broader practice. Matt Taylor's here with us, and I'll put the links in here later. But make sure he's got a great book that came out last year, the Violent Take It by Force, right? Right. On January 6th. You guys have to understand this. I've been wanting to get to this for a long time, because I think when folks in secular society, I'm a proud lapsed Catholic, even as I try to raise my kid a proper Catholic, it's amazing I don't instantaneously incinerate when I walk into church, but we don't know this stuff. I was working on I still am, rather, I should say, wrapping up a profile of the Indiana Lieutenant Governor, who is I'm 98% certain is an NAR. Certainly a charismatic Pentecostal.
Mike, what's his last name?
Yeah, Beckwith.
Beckwith, that's right. Yep. Oh yeah, he's on my radar.
like, like any good Pentecostal pastor turned political leader, they caught him, his staff, watching deep fake porn of other women in the State House recently.
Well,
I mean, hey man,
they preach the stuff, you don't expect them to live it, do
you? I sat through a service at his church, and it's it's like what you might call one of the garage churches. All right, it's a low church. It's out in ex-urban Indy, and I've never gone. This is actually my first Pentecostal service, and I sat through it, and the preacher was up there talking about oh God, what was he talking about? He's talking about don't pray to the Virgin Mary. She's not a virgin. She never stayed that way. These other people have it wrong. Don't trust the people that pray to saints, because they got it wrong. Go right to the big man himself. Don't listen to the people. And when I heard that in the church, I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, they really don't like immigrants, do they? And I was like, whatever. Like 2 weeks later, I'm back home and here in suburban DC. And I lost my keys, and I said a prayer to St. Anthony. And I'm like, oh, Mother Mary, they're talking about me.
You papists, lapsed papists, are still papists.
the string being pulled right now. Direct line from here to the Vatican.
Yep. It's funny because within these kind of New Apostolic Reformation circles, so part of what the central thing that really delineates this from more mainstream conventional evangelicalism, much less Christianity, is that they believe in modern day apostles and prophets, right? And so their leaders, almost all the leaders who joined these NAR networks in the 1990s and early 2000s, identify themselves as either apostles or prophets or both. And if you know the Christian tradition and what those terms, the weight that those terms carry, right? Apostle and prophet, these are ancient forms of Christian leadership that are referenced within the New Testament, but that is like the apex of authority within the Christian tradition, right? The apostles are the original disciples of Jesus, the founders of the Christian church. And so the NAR is part of this modern phenomenon of leaders claiming these titles of apostle and prophet and trying to lay claim to the authority, the kind of ground level, ultimate authority within the Christian tradition, at least humanly speaking, right? And so it's interesting that they would be going around chastising people for praying to saints and having intermediaries between man and God, because like the apostles and prophets literally exist on a different plane for these folks and are like these spiritual elites who can hear directly from God and guide the church into the God's agenda, right? Isn't that what saints are supposed to do? Isn't that what popes are supposed to do? Right? Like, so they're just kind of created a different hierarchy, and then they're bad mouthing the hierarchies of others.